The HOA has always been abusive, but this time they crossed the line. My sister, who is disabled, was literally chained up in the backyard by these sick people, all because we didn't follow the rules of the community. But they didn't count on one thing: they picked the wrong family to mess with. Living in Whispering Pines, an exclusive gated community nestled in the mountains of Montana, should have been a dream. The breathtaking views of snow-capped peaks, pristine lakes, and dense forests attracted wealthy homeowners seeking tranquility away from city life. But when that community is run by an HOA comprised of people who think they can do whatever they want, it quickly becomes a nightmare. I always knew there was something wrong with the HOA in Whispering Pines. They were stricter than North Korean police. If a car was parked 10 minutes longer than allowed, it was fined. If your grass was an inch longer than their standard, a warning appeared on your door before the dew had even dried. But what they did to my sister went from ridiculous to criminal in the blink of an eye. My sister Emily was born with a neurological condition that prevents her from walking. This means she uses a wheelchair and needs certain adjustments to get around. Well, the HOA already picked on us for this. Complaints that the access ramp didn't match the rustic mountain aesthetic of the neighborhood, that the sidewalk should be kept in the original rugged stone pattern, impossible for wheelchair wheels. And of course, that the neighbors were annoyed by the adaptations. But everything changed the day Emily decided to spend some time in her backyard. It was a crisp autumn morning with the aspen leaves turning brilliant gold. She was with her laptop on her lap, drinking a coffee, just existing, something that apparently was a crime in Whispering Pines. Because less than half an hour later, the HOA leader appeared on our doorstep with the expression of someone about to announce the apocalypse. Victoria Harrington, or Queen Victoria as residents secretly called her, had that classic look of someone who spends her days making up useless rules. Hair starched with hairspray, clothes with too many buttons, and a ridiculous clipboard as if she were an FBI agent overseeing a case of the utmost importance. Without even saying hello, she let loose. "Your sister can't stay in the yard." I blinked, expecting her to say it was a joke. "What?" The woman sighed as if she were explaining something obvious to a dumb child. "The yard can't be used for this kind of activity. Only gardening and supervised meetings are allowed." I laughed. I had to laugh. "So you're telling me that my sister can't sit in the backyard of our own house?" She didn't blink. "Yes, it's in the rules." The rules? Those damn rules that nobody ever signed but which they somehow decided were law. I tried to argue, of course, but when it comes to these people, arguing is pointless. They don't want dialogue, they want control. Victoria left, but I knew she wasn't going to give up, and I was right. Because the next day, something happened that I never thought I would see in my life. I'd gone out to sort some things out at the local hardware store, and when I came back, I got a shock. Emily was trapped, not in a figurative way. They had chained her wheelchair. I thought I'd seen wrong. I rushed over and yes, there was a thick chain holding the base of the wheelchair to the balcony railing. And my sister. Well, she had her arms crossed and looked like she had already passed the panic stage and was now just waiting to see how far these people's insanity would go. "They said it's to make sure I don't disturb the neighborhood," said Emily without even looking at me. I felt my blood boil. I tried to pull the chain. It was locked with an industrial padlock. Emily rolled her eyes. "I already tried, genius." The HOA literally chained up a disabled person. I wanted to scream. I wanted to set something on fire. But before I could do anything stupid, a thought popped into my head. This wasn't just a ridiculous violation of the rules. This was kidnapping. I picked up the phone and was dialing the police when I noticed something strange across the street. A black Ford Expedition with dark windows had been parked for a long time. I could have sworn I'd seen this SUV before, the same week, driving slowly down the street, in the market parking lot, and now standing there, watching. It was then that a thought occurred to me that made my heart race. What if the HOA wasn't the only organization involved in something illegal here? What if that car wasn't there by chance? And that's when the tables began to turn. Because unbeknownst to Victoria Harrington, there was something much bigger going on in Whispering Pines, and the HOA had no idea that it had been watched for a long time. My sister was trapped, chained up as if she were an object, and all because the HOA decided that a disabled person sitting in their own backyard was a problem for the aesthetics of the neighborhood. I don't know what stopped me from simply kicking down the door of Victoria's house. Perhaps the fact that I was still trying to understand the level of insanity I was dealing with. Emily, on the other hand, was incredibly calm for someone who was literally chained up in her own backyard. "Shouldn't you be more, I don't know, desperate?" I asked as I pulled the chain once more to no avail. She sighed. "Oh, I'm past the desperate stage, brother. Now I'm just waiting to see how far these people will go." What annoyed me most was that they knew I'd left. They waited for me to turn my back, came into my yard as if they owned the place, and chained my sister up because they could. It wasn't going to stay that way. I picked up the phone and dialed the police, but before I could complete the call, that black expedition across the street distracted me again. Why was that car always here? The driver's window lowered slightly, just enough for me to realize that someone was watching. And then I understood. The HOA wasn't the only organization involved in something shady here. The FBI was investigating Whispering Pines. It hit me all at once. If there's one thing the FBI does very well, it's gather information without anyone noticing. They don't just appear out of nowhere in a cinematic raid. They watch, they wait, they gather evidence. What worried me was if they were investigating. It meant that this HOA was involved in something much worse than just abusing power. That's when I realized that I had no time to waste. I left my phone in my pocket, forget the regular police number. This was already a federal problem. I looked at the black SUV again. The person in it was still watching me, so I decided to do something risky. I raised my hand and waved. For a second, nothing happened. But then, as if I had passed the test of some psychological game, the SUV turned on its headlights and started moving slowly until it stopped in front of my house. Emily raised an eyebrow. What have you done now?" Before I could answer, the car door opened. Out stepped a man wearing a black suit, dark glasses, stiff posture. He stopped in front of me, looked at Emily, looked at the chains. Then he slowly took off his glasses and finally spoke. "I think we have enough evidence." I didn't know whether to be relieved or worried. Evidence of what exactly? The man turned to look in the direction of Victoria's house. Evidence that this community is involved in something much more serious than you realize. The FBI agent walked over to Emily and looked at the chains. "This is a federal crime." Well, I already knew that, but the way he said it made me realize that it wasn't just about my sister. This agent didn't seem surprised, as if this was just another detail in something much bigger. I crossed my arms. "Do you want to tell me what the hell is going on here?" The man looked at me as if pondering whether or not to reveal something, and then he spoke. "This neighborhood has been the target of a secret investigation for months. The HOA isn't just abusing power, they're involved in illegal activities." I exchanged a quick glance with Emily. "What do you mean, illegal activities?" "Activities like," I pressed. He hesitated, but then, as if he had made up his mind, he said, "Like embezzlement, illegal use of land, and possibly human trafficking." My heart stopped. Wait a minute, what? The HOA was involved in human trafficking. For a moment, I thought I'd heard wrong, but no, the officer was serious. Emily, who until then had been incredibly calm, turned pale. "What exactly did you find out?" I asked, my voice coming out lower than I expected. The agent looked around as if checking to see if anyone was listening. Then he lowered his tone and said something that sent a chill down my spine. "There is a pattern. People disappearing, fraudulent documentation, houses being repossessed without the former residents having officially sold them. And now this." He pointed at Emily. "They didn't just want to remove her from the yard. They were testing how far they could go." I felt the anger coming back full force. This wasn't just about stupid rules. This was something much bigger. And from the looks of it, Victoria had no idea that she was about to become the target of a federal investigation. but I was going to make sure she found out in the most painful way possible. I faced the FBI agent. What's the next step? He put his glasses back on. Now we wait for them to hang themselves. And just when the HOA thought they could keep going over the edge, they had no idea that the fall was right in front of them. Now it all made sense. The HOA has always been garbage, but I never imagined that they were involved in something so big. Fraud, embezzlement, and even human trafficking. This was no longer just abuse of power. It was a federal crime, and they had no idea they were about to go down. The FBI agent told me to wait. They were gathering evidence, letting those involved hang themselves. But I'm not the type to stand around waiting for justice to act in its own bureaucratic time. So while the FBI monitored everything from their side, I decided to start my own plan. The next day, I did something I knew would poke the beast. I put Emily back in the yard with a new chair, a parasol, and a glass of lemonade by her side, as if nothing had happened. If the HOA was really involved in illegal things, I wanted to see how far they would go to hide their tracks. And as expected, it didn't take long for Victoria to reappear. She came marching down the cobblestone path like a judge about to hand down a death sentence. The expression on her face was a mixture of anger and nervousness, perhaps because, deep down, she already knew something was wrong. I've already warned you that your sister can't stay here. I feigned confusion, tilting my head. You already told me, didn't you? But I don't remember seeing any law that forbids a person from sitting in their own yard. Victoria clenched her jaw, her eyes twitching slightly. She was nervous. That was interesting. The rules of the community must be respected. She lowered her voice, lower than usual. So now you don't want to draw attention to yourself. Something was happening, and I wanted to find out what. That's when I noticed a detail I'd never noticed before. While Victoria was freaking out at me, 2 other HOA members were standing a little further back, whispering to each other. One of them was holding a thick envelope. My instinct screamed, money. And at that moment, I knew I had to provoke them just a little bit more to get them to give themselves up. I imagine that keeping these absurd rules is a lot of work, I said, crossing my arms. It must be difficult to ensure that everyone follows the rules the way you want them to. She blinked a few times, suspiciously. It's a question of maintaining the neighborhood's standard. And does this standard, I continued, involve buying people? Her expression changed on the spot. It was microscopic, but it was enough. Her face went as white as paper, and the 2 HOA members standing behind her froze. There was the confirmation I needed. They were involved in something much bigger. If there's one thing I've learned about criminals throughout my life, it's that the more they think they're in control, the more reckless they get. So I did exactly what a stubborn and insufferable guy would do. I kept teasing. Emily, who had already understood my game, smiled and picked up her cell phone. Do you want me to record this conversation? It'll make great content. The HOA freaked out. You can't do that, Victoria screamed, her face turning red. I laughed. But what about freedom of expression? Or is that outside the rules too? That was the last straw. The envelope that the 2 HOA members were holding fell to the floor, bursting open, and right there, in front of everyone, I saw what they were hiding, piles of money, and among the notes, documents with names and addresses. I knew I couldn't touch it without a warrant, but I didn't need to, because the FBI was already watching. Exactly 9 minutes later, the first black car appeared, and then the second and the third. I already knew what was happening, but the HOA didn't notice until it was too late. The agents came out of the cars like an avalanche. They knew exactly who to look for. And then something happened that I'll never forget. Victoria, the leader of the HOA, looked at me with pure hatred and whispered, "What have you done?" "Nothing. You did it all by yourself." And before she could answer, FBI agents surrounded everyone. "Hands where I can see them, now." Silence filled the street. One of the agents picked up the envelope from the ground and looked at it quickly. It was everything they needed: names, illegal payments, an entire scheme to defraud and disappear people. And then came what I had been waiting for the most, the handcuffs. First on the two HOA members, then on Victoria. And it was there, right in front of everyone, that Victoria finally understood that her downfall was inevitable. She tried to argue. She tried to scream, but no one there was going to save her. And what about me? I just crossed my arms and watched. Because finally, after years of abusive power, the HOA was crumbling. And my friend, it wasn't over yet. Just as the agents were about to lead Victoria away, a sleek black Tesla pulled up at the entrance of the cul-de-sac. The door opened, and out stepped a man who seemed to command attention without even trying. Tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, with silver-streaked hair and piercing blue eyes, he surveyed the scene with clinical detachment. "Who the hell is that?" I whispered to the FBI agent beside me. "That's Special Agent Dominic Reeves," he replied, his voice dropping. "The lead investigator on this case for the past year. He doesn't usually show up for arrests unless..." Unless what? Unless there's more to the story than we initially thought. Agent Reeves walked directly to Victoria, who had suddenly gone from defiant to terrified. The color drained from her face as if she'd seen a ghost. "Victoria Harrington," Reeves said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of steel. "We finally meet in person." Victoria's response chilled me to the bone. "You promised you wouldn't come here," she hissed. "We had a deal." Reeves smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Deals require both parties to maintain their end of the bargain. You've been sloppy, Victoria." The FBI agent next to me tensed. Something was happening that wasn't in the script. "What's going on?" I demanded. Before anyone could answer, Victoria made a desperate lunge toward Emily, reaching into her jacket pocket. "If I'm going down, I'm taking." Two shots rang out in rapid succession. Victoria crumpled to the ground, her hand still clutching something in her pocket. Agent Reeves stood with his weapon drawn, smoke still curling from the barrel. "Secure the scene," he barked, and agents swarmed around Victoria's fallen form. One of them carefully extracted what she had been reaching for, not a weapon, but a small device with a blinking red light. "Remote detonator," the agent called out. "We've got a situation." The whole street watched in silence. The neighbors who had once been afraid to stand up to the HOA were now paralyzed, staring at the surreal scene unfolding in front of them. The leader of the association bleeding on the pristine pavement, FBI agents calling for bomb squads, and Agent Reeves now standing over me with an expression I couldn't read. "You and your sister need to come with me immediately," he said, not a request but a command. "This goes deeper than you can imagine." "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "What was she going to detonate?" Reeves glanced around, then leaned in closer. "Whispering Pines isn't just a neighborhood with an overzealous HOA. It's a front for one of the most sophisticated human trafficking operations we've seen in decades. The entire community was designed for it. Remote location, tight security, strict rules to keep residents isolated and afraid." Emily, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "And what does that have to do with me? Why chain me up?" "Because you saw something you weren't supposed to see," came a new voice. We all turned to see a woman approaching, mid-30s, with a severe bob haircut and the confident stride of someone used to being in charge. She flashed a badge. "Detective Naomi Chen, Montana State Police. I've been undercover as a resident here for 8 months." "Naomi lives 3 doors down," Emily said, recognition dawning. "She's the only one who ever offered to help with my accessibility issues." Detective Chen nodded. "And last week, when you were in your backyard, you were using your laptop to work. You happened to be facing the window of the community center across the ravine." Emily's eyes widened. "I did see something. I thought it was just a weird meeting. People being led through the back rooms." "Those weren't meetings," Reeves cut in. "Those were auctions, human auctions. The HOA has been using the community center as a transfer point. That's why Victoria was so desperate to keep you away from your yard. Your line of sight was directly into their operation." I felt sick. So all those missing persons reports in the region. "Many ended up passing through here," Chen confirmed grimly. The HOA used their authority to create a perfect cover. Who questions when someone moves away from a strict community? Who notices when a visitor disappears after supposedly leaving town? The agents were now moving from house to house, evacuating residents as bomb-sniffing dogs were brought in. The entire scene had transformed from an arrest into what looked like a major operation. Reeves turned to me again. Your sister wasn't just an inconvenience to them. She was a liability. They were planning to make her disappear today. How do you know that? I demanded. Because we intercepted communications last night, Chen explained. That's why we were ready to move in, but Victoria wasn't supposed to be armed with a detonator. Something spooked them. Just then, another agent jogged up to Reeves. Sir, we found it. Basement of the community center. At least 12 people being held and enough explosives to level half the neighborhood. Reeves nodded grimly. Get them out safely, and find me whoever else was working with Victoria. This wasn't a one-woman operation. As the FBI and state police swarmed through Whispering Pines, Emily and I were escorted to a secure location. The community that had once seemed like a pristine mountain paradise was now revealed as something far more sinister. I have a question, Emily said as we sat in the back of an armored SUV. If you knew all this was happening, why wait until today? Why let them chain me up? Detective Chen, who was riding with us, looked uncomfortable. We needed irrefutable evidence of their methods. We knew they were watching you, but we didn't think they'd go so far as to physically restrain you. When they did. You used my sister as bait, I said, my voice cold. It wasn't supposed to happen that way, Reeves said from the front seat. We had agents watching your house around the clock, but Victoria moved faster than we anticipated. And that makes it okay. Reeves turned to look at me directly. No, it doesn't. But what happened today means that dozens of people who would have been sold into modern slavery will go home to their families instead, including the 12 in that basement. The reality of what had been happening in our seemingly perfect neighborhood was still sinking in. All those strict rules, the constant surveillance, the fear tactics, they weren't just the actions of power-hungry HOA members. They were deliberate strategies to isolate and control an entire community while something monstrous happened right under our noses. Over the next few days, the truth began to spread. The investigation revealed that the HOA was the public face of a criminal enterprise that had operated for years. They used absurd rules to force residents to sell their homes for low prices. They then resold the properties illegally, embezzling money and relocating residents who often disappeared without a trace. It was much worse than I imagined. And the craziest thing, my sister was almost a victim of this scheme. That attempt to remove her from the yard wasn't just some tantrum, it was a test. They wanted to see if they could control her, if anyone would notice if she disappeared. And when I realized that, my blood ran cold. Because if I hadn't interfered, Emily could have simply disappeared. But she didn't, and now no one else was going to disappear in this neighborhood. With the arrest of the leaders, the HOA was dissolved. The documents showed that most of the rules they imposed weren't even legal. They just relied on people's fear to maintain control. And without that fear, Whispering Pines changed from water to wine. In the following months, everything the HOA did was undone. Undue fines were canceled. The fences they had ordered torn down were rebuilt. The absurd fees they charged ceased to exist. And for the first time in a long time, people began to live without fear of opening their mouths. Emily, of course, became a local legend. Not only did she become a symbol of resistance against the HOA, she even managed to get an accessibility project approved for the neighborhood. Irony of fate, the woman who tried to put her in chains ended up in jail for real. The trial was a show apart. When the evidence came to light, Victoria tried to play the victim. I was just following orders. I didn't know what was going on. But the judges didn't fall for it. What no one expected was Agent Reeves' testimony. As the lead investigator, he revealed that Victoria wasn't just a participant. She was one of the architects of the entire operation. The human trafficking ring had tentacles that reached into law enforcement, local government, and even the FBI itself. That's why it took us so long to move, he explained on the stand. We needed to be certain we could trust our own people. In a shocking twist, 3 other FBI agents were arrested as accomplices, along with 2 local judges and a state senator. The case became one of the largest human trafficking busts in U.S. history, all because my sister wanted to sit in her backyard with a laptop. Victoria received multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. And ironically, she ended up in a place where the rules really are unbreakable, a maximum security cell with bars, strict rules, and no authority to impose her ridiculous will. If there's one thing Victoria learned, it's that power doesn't last forever. You can reign for a while. You can boss others around. You can abuse your position. But one day, the house always falls. And the fall can be much, much more painful than you think. Emily and I still live in Whispering Pines, though it has a new name now, Freedom Ridge. The community has been rebuilt, literally and figuratively. Agent Reeves stops by occasionally, not as an investigator but as a friend. He still carries the weight of what happened, especially the moments when Emily was in danger. I made a call that put your sister at risk, he told me one evening as we sat on the deck overlooking the mountains. I'll never fully forgive myself for that. But you saved all those people, Emily reminded him. Sometimes the hardest choices are the most necessary ones. Detective Chen moved into the community permanently. She heads the new Neighborhood Watch program, a far cry from the oppressive HOA of before. She's made it her mission to ensure nothing like this ever happens again. As for me, I've learned that evil often hides in plain sight, behind clipboards and rule books and perfectly manicured lawns. But I've also learned that it only takes a few brave people to stand up and say, enough, to change everything. The chains that once bound my sister's wheelchair now hang on our wall, a reminder that freedom is never guaranteed, that it must be fought for, and that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are the ones with smiles on their faces and bylaws in their hands. And if you liked this story, don't forget to leave a comment and a like. Because in a world where the truth is often stranger than fiction, sharing these stories might just help someone recognize the chains before they're locked in place.